Well, evening. This is about the last of it tonight. 9/18/2021, the date. It is still Saturday night. Yeah, it's still 11:30. We were doing Sea Rosewood, California. Yeah. Just got the dog out. I was coming across some news articles on the social media feeds. One of which I thought it was going to be false news until I had to check into it. It kind of made sense, especially when I had about 3 or 4 other local papers of the area covering the same thing. I kept asking myself, how come the regular media hadn't picked up on the damn thing in the first place? We are talking environmental situation. We're talking about a potential hazard down the road. It's bad enough when the Earth is dealing with us pesky humans sucking up life essence left and right. Or even when we're trying to struggle to stay alive, we're still pissing off old Earth. Out in the desert areas of Arizona, there are cracks happening. There are fissures expanding. At first when I heard about it, I thought, wait a second, how crazy is that? That's crazy. Until I had to research and found out through a few other media sources that were talking the same thing, like, okay, now we're in trouble. Then I had to remember my old geology. Taking it back a few years ago, beginning of my college days, I wanted to get a refresher course on what geology was all about, unless we changed some news left and right. Some of the stuff hadn't, and the rest of it had. Cracks in the fissure are happening because the water is not being replaced into the bedrock, and the Earth is suffering through it. Now, it's one thing when there's an abundance of water going into the ground itself. There are several layers. There are certain mineral deposits out there, limestone being one of them, calcium carbonate another one, that are dissolvable. There are certain rocks that can dissolve in water, given time. Carlsbad Caverns. You ever visited Carlsbad Caverns before? Walked through there, hear and feel it, moisture. I've heard it was pretty interesting. Seeing stalactites and stalagmites. Like, stalactites are the rock formations of dissolved minerals from water into the ground and making these empty caverns. You see columns of minerals all over the place. Those are stalagmites because they might reach the surface. Stalactites are cones going down, and you'll see various levels of minerals in them, sedimentary layers, and there are columns of water shaping and forming these rocks. Beautiful to look at at this point over here, but still dangerous to deal with, because in dealing with geology, you never know when the structure is going to be solid enough and stable enough. For decades and centuries, I guess, Carlsbad has been forming itself, and we haven't had any issues concerning about collapses. Always concerns me concerning about caverns. Beautiful as they are, there's always a danger level in those things, because knowing geology a little bit, I'm not a geologist entirely, but a little bit of training on that damn thing. Still, a little training goes a long way, but sometimes a little training is dangerous as well. that the ground is unpredictable. Florida, Panhandle, swamp pond, you think all that is. Would have surprised the hell out of you that over the decades, you had sinkholes left and right. Dissolved areas where caverns open up for these large fissures, and people, buildings, and everything else goes crumbling right into it. Before the people, they still probably have them anyway. We just never knew it. But it's a constant renewal of the earth, and it's all part of the geologic process and the meteorological process. Well, there are forms of rocks and layers of rocks that are subject to saturation of liquid, saturation of groundwater. They do dissolve and make empty pockets in the earth. Well, if there's a large enough vein of this stretching up to the surface, then you got a potential situation right there. With the ground fissures in Arizona, as I understand them, we have an extreme drought situation that's been happening for a long time already. It's happening out here in the western states like crazy, all the way through Colorado and Texas. We've got certain states out there sucking up oil through a process called fracking, forcing liquid into strata to extract gas and oil, natural gas and oil, off of the rocks. They're shifting the ground left to right, causing multiple earthquakes in certain areas. They've been doing that for a while. But the ground fissures is what I'm worried about, is when there's a lack of water and the fissures are opening up, because the surface tension is becoming worse and worse for the state. The fissure can open up to at least a huge gash and potential for loss of life. I'm saying potential of loss of life because if we actually had that happening in inhabited areas actually, such as cities, that's what scares me the most. Hearing about the fissures happening out in Arizona is one thing. Seeing the ground collapsing and sinkholes forming left and right in Arizona, and not Arizona, but in Florida, and probably a few other states, it scares the hell out of me. Because I keep thinking California will be next. We're not exactly in the safest geologic area in the first place out here in the Antelope Valley. There's no way. I assumed we were, but we weren't. The professor I took had to remind me that one of the valleys I used to live in during the '94 earthquake was a shaped bowl. We had minerals from all over the rocks, all over the hillsides, would pour their minerals all throughout the layers of the bowl, compacted, and compacted, and compacted, and compacted. So we would have a sedimentary layer, and in there would be pockets of groundwater holding the minerals together. Certain minerals would not interact with the water very well, and others would dissolve. But there hadn't been all that much dissolving happening because we didn't have that many sinkholes happening in San Fernando Valley. At least none reported anyway. But we did have liquefaction happening. We had quicksand. If there's enough disturbance in the surface tension of the minerals with enough shaking in it, and you have fluid being mixed in with it, you are creating a suction vortex, basically, is I'm trying to understand what they were trying to tell us about it. And that's what probably caused a lot of damage in the San Fernando Valley back in '94 and everywhere else. So thinking that we were on solid bedrock out here in Antelope Valley, I assumed that we would be safe from it. I didn't realize the Antelope Valley was also suffered damage during the '94 earthquake. And I had forgotten that the Antelope Valley is also what they would call an alluvial plain, basically sedimentary rock mixed in with water pockets that we drill into to suck out the liquid. And eventually, if there's going to be enough empty pockets of liquid sucked out without anything replacing it, then that would give us issues. It's what I'm afraid of. This is science. This is geology. And this is a dog trying to get under a cover here. Things happen at night. What scares me the most is not having an earthquake from a natural geologic pressure happening where the fault lines are going to be shifting around laterally, either up and down diagonally or side to side, moving around a bit. We have certain types of fault lines that actually move ahead. They call them slip strikes. Sometimes they would go up or down, move side to side. What concerns me, if the water pressure in the ground drops to a certain critical level, how will the surface tension and the weight of those rocks and the weight that we've been putting on it, how will that react? Are we going to be creating ourselves another sinkhole? Are we going to be creating a geologic nightmare out here? It scares me. It scares me that I have to be reminded of certain things that may have been a natural situation, but because of the weather being interfered with left and right, the change is happening more and more than what we can deal with. Other towns in other states are dealing with drastic weather changes that are redecorating their whole landscape, basically. Reshaping, reformatting. That even our area will be going through the same situation because we're all being interconnected at this point. The ground fissures in Arizona are just but one example of a geologic process that probably should not have happened unless it was already part of a natural situation already, that if there was groundwater being departed, then we got the cracks. Think of it as your skin. The Earth's surface is the skin of itself, of the mantle and of the core. The core being the bone, the mantle being the muscle, and the skin being the surface tension. We get older. Our skin goes through a lot of metabolic changes. If we lose fluidity, if we lose fluid in our skins, if we're not sucking enough water in our system over here, if we're not creaming up our skin to make sure that we're losing less and less fluid, it becomes more and more brittle, more and more less flexible, and the surface tension becomes even worse to deal with. You could use fingernails like these. See these? Okay. Scrape it against my skin over here. Now, if my skin is really turning into paper mache. I will tear apart a layer and exposing underneath. That's what I'm afraid of, what's going to be happening on the Earth's surface at this point over here. If the Earth doesn't have enough fluidity and enough fluid actually inside of it to maintain and regulate itself, then I'm afraid that we're going to be running into the Earth's skin worse than any other skin that you've ever had or seen other people have. You think a dermatologist is going to be able to help the Earth? I don't know. I don't think so. Dermatologists probably write a prescription for enough cream. The cream is supposed to help prevent moisture with oils and emoluments and all that sort of chemical crap. To protect it, to put a layer on the skin to make sure that there's no moisture being leaked out, except for the underpits and certain other areas that moisture accumulates. That's why we have to keep putting up different creams and different powders to make sure that we are retaining our moisture and our longevity of our skin. But how do we do that for the geology itself? How do we do that for the layers of rock? Our science is barely covering geology as it is. Food prices are already astronomical as it is. A small dab of milk like this at one time was no more than maybe a few cents if we're lucky. These days we're lucky enough if it's not $5 for a small amount like this, for less than a pint. And if it was $5 a pint, I just wasted $5 down my gut. Everything is happening, and some things are interconnected and other things aren't. But what surprises me is the media, who makes a big deal about other people's head games for a lot of things, haven't picked up on this, and I'm surprised that the science editors and the science geeks out there haven't picked up on it either. So this is being thrown out to all those geeks out there. All the science geeks, nerds, and rockhounds. You got a way of trying to solve the Earth's fluidity problem, or lack of it. The only thing I know is conservation. And what I'd like for the geeks and the nerds and the rockhounds to do is basically hound the press on this more and more. This is dangerous, guys. This is part of the continuation and the deterioration of our planet. This is my fear being manifested at this point. Some people keep thinking Revelation's going to happen. I think we're going to be more and more for that one. Because either we're heading into a new norm right now, which nobody else is going to be liking and barely surviving through, or we're going to try finding some way to get around this damn thing. I'm hoping without screwing our ground in our lives at the same time. Because what I'm afraid of these days, and I am afraid of it sometimes, when I start thinking about it more and more, the sinkhole opens up and I'm not going anywhere except down to the center of the earth or to the end of it, and I'm going to die not because of the fall, because of the sun's stop, or maybe because of the roadblocks along the way. I might run into geodes with some crystalline formations that might have a problem with my skin and my body, as the Earth's gravity dragging me through down to the core, or to the end of the pit anyway. be bouncing off of rocks left to right and pulverized left to right until there's nothing but a little bit of a smear down below. Maybe I'll be running into guys and saying, "Thrust on the next victim." And if we happen to hear the Earth yelling back, saying, "Okay," I don't know if you can run fast enough for that. Have a nice night.